There's a class system in America. We don't do well by the folks who don't have as much as others. And unfortunately, they have been exploited to the degree that they've been pitted one against each other. If they would get together and have a movement for true democracy in this country, regardless of your race or your income or your status. No, we're not going to have perfection, but we certainly could attempt to strive for a better lives for everybody.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Christina.
Hi. Thank you for coming and joining us today. We are so happy to share our time with you. Give me just a moment. I'm going to share my screen with you and we can jump right into it. All right. All right, can we all see? We're good. All right, great. Let's get to it.
What did you say?
So good afternoon and welcome Atlantic City and Stockton community members. Thank you all for joining us for our intergenerational storytelling project launch.
That's not
Hope you all enjoyed the playlist. I don't know if you caught it. Those were some of the audio clips from our actual interviews with the seniors. For that, hopefully I can share that in another way later on, but they had some really poignant quotes throughout that we wanted to highlight. My name is Christina Noble, and I am the project manager for Stories of Atlantic City. I'll be serving as your host today. We also have on the call with us Stories of AC team members, Toby Rosenthal, who is our program coordinator, Erin O'Hanlon, who is the Service Learning Senior Program Coordinator at Stockton, and Marissa, Luca, one of our multimedia content producers. We also have from Stockton Media's Civil Rights and Social Change course, Dr. Christina Morus. We have a few more special guests today that you'll all get to meet shortly. Before we dive into all the wonderful content we have, I'd like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items. This event will be recorded, so please inform us if you do not consent to this. We will do our best to accommodate you. At the end of the program, we will invite you all to engage a bit and share your thoughts and ask questions to our project participants. Please be sure to stay muted until the end. In the meantime, however, please feel free to drop any questions or timely comments you may have in the chat for our presenters. And someone from the Stories of AC team will be manning the conversation. Now that that's all out the way, I'd like to virtually hand the mic to Dr. Christina Morus, who will tell you more about the project.
All right, can everybody hear me? Hi, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for being here. I want to first really give a huge thank you to our community elder participants. You've been so generous with your time, and I can say with confidence that your stories have profoundly impacted the students. I want to thank the Stories of AC team, Toby Rosenthal for her oversight, Christina Noble for coordination and communication with the elders, Erin O'Hanlon for guiding the students, and a special thank you to Marissa, Luca, and Fabulous Florist, who were the TAs for this course, and the Stories of Atlantic City liaisons for our students. And speaking of the students, thank you so much to all the students who participated in this project last semester. Your commitment to this project is really what made it happen. And you did it all digitally and in the time of COVID. You are the pioneers, and because of your hard work, the project will continue. Of course, a thank you to Stockton University for its support, especially Arts and Humanities Dean Lisa Honecker and Erin O'Hanlon of the Center for Community Engagement and Service Learning. And finally, I thank the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation for their continued support of Stories of Atlantic City. In 2009, I was a Fulbright Scholar at the University of Belgrade in Serbia. The students there asked me to offer a class on the US Civil Rights Movement. Having an interest in the discourse and strategies of the 1960s social movements, I enthusiastically agreed. When I returned to Stockton, I was excited to adapt the course for upper-level communication students. And over the last 10 years, it has continued to evolve. With the rise of global neo-fascism and the increased visibility of defamed, maimed, and murdered Black bodies, what started as a course about the historical struggle for civil rights is now just as much a course about the legacy of white supremacy. This past summer, as COVID raged and Black Lives Matter demonstrations brought demands for racial justice to the front of national consciousness again, I was again preparing this course. To engage students in the contemporary work of anti-racism, it seemed crucial that students understand the relationship between the long history of racial oppression and present-day racial injustice. History is a river that we seek to dam with monumental events like bookends. But the struggle for racial justice didn't start with the murder of Emmett Till and didn't end with Dr. King's March on Washington. When we remove these barriers to history, the river flows, nourishing the connections between past and present. Hence, in fall 20, my Media, Civil Rights, and Social Change class partnered with Stories of Atlantic City and the Atlantic City Golden Circle Club. The students interviewed the elders about their memories of the civil rights movement, their feelings about Black Lives Matter protests, and reflections on the past and future of racial justice in Atlantic City and beyond. Throughout the semester, as students studied the history of racism in the United States, the Stories of AC team prepared them for the interviews. In October, students and elders were introduced to one another through our intergenerational story circle, where all participants shared their first memories of their own racial consciousness. Erin O'Hanlon then guided the students to develop interview questions. 5 teams of students went on to interview a total of 11 elders in fall 20. The interviews have been uploaded to the story bank, including audio, transcript of the interview, and any photos or documents the interviewees provided. And students created summaries of each interview so that the segments are indexed by topic. And as the story bank grows, they're easy to access. Finally, using these interviews, the Stories of AC team created a multimedia, living, evolving digital story that you'll see today. These are but the first voices. This semester, my class is going to interview another group of elders, and then their stories will also become part of the digital story. And so what began as a spark over the summer has grown into a meaningful intergenerational project, demonstrating the power of community storytelling and the importance of sustaining a space where the stories of Atlantic City and its people can be told, heard, and preserved. And as you'll hear today, this project has been meaningful to students on so many levels. Students say things like, thank you for this amazing opportunity. It was an incredible learning experience that I'll never forget. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be part of something so powerful. The project was fascinating and unlike any class project I've done in the past. And then one of my favorites, keep this project going, and with it, we will enact positive change. Student comments also spoke to the power of intergenerational storytelling and the impact that this had on students' awareness of racial injustice, as well as their impacts of Atlantic City. It was fascinating getting to know the elders and hearing their stories and how similar the past is to today. Racial injustice is still prevalent. The civil rights movement took place to gain equal rights for Black people. The Black Lives Matter movement is standing for the same today. And then I learned so much about the experiences of people of color in Atlantic City and in the United States in the 50s and 60s. I didn't realize how prevalent things like racism, segregation, and redlining were in Atlantic City until this project. And then finally, the elders taught me a lot about Atlantic City, its history, and its people. I have a totally different perspective on AC now. I wish everyone could have the experience that I had. And because of this experience, I feel so connected to the Atlantic City community because the stories we heard remind us of how amazing the people in Atlantic City are. Okay, so lots of excellent feedback from the students about this project, but you don't have to just take it from me. To tell you more, I'm going to throw it over to Christina Noble, who's going to talk with a panel of our student interviewees and community elders.
Great, thank you, Dr. Morus. So before we jump into our discussion, I want to talk a bit about the impacts on the perceptions of AC. Before I do that, I'd like to give a brief introduction for those of you who may not know who Stories of AC are. In short, we are a collaborative project focused on telling restorative, untold stories about the city and its people. And we are working on stories and information sharing that inspires hope, change, and highlights experiences of resilience despite challenges. We now have 3 main focus areas, and these include traditional and hyperlocal media collaboration. So we function as our own news hub, community organizing and outreach. And finally, we serve as an education resource. We're supported by Stockton University, which allows us to collaborate with students in multiple capacities, as you can see with this project. So as I mentioned, our main objective is to highlight stories of resilience throughout the AC community. If stories offered by Black seniors who lived through the civil rights era does not epitomize resilience, then I don't know what does. These are the types of stories we aim to preserve. I was so honored to have played a role in this intergenerational project. I wore a few hats throughout, but as community organizers for Stories of AC, my main job was to act as a liaison between the participating seniors and Dr. Morris's class. I unfortunately lost both of my sets of grandparents some time ago, all of which lived in Atlantic City. So being able to share the time with these elders on the project really made me feel like home. I thoroughly enjoyed each connection we made. They soon began to feel like my own grandparents and aunts and uncles. One of the participants actually is my aunt, but I felt even closer to her through learning more about her personal story. Even more interestingly, I realized that many of the seniors we interviewed had some type of connection to my own family, whether they were family friends or colleagues or had grandchildren that are now currently my friends. And their relationships also intertwined with each other's. These connections reminded me just how close-knit the Atlantic City community is. It's encouraging to see a group of people that are so passionate about creating change and have such an incredible connection to one another. The people of this great city are inspiring, resilient, and Atlantic City, it just has such a rich, amazing history, and its roots has so much innovation and social triumph. It has overcome a lot and has become stronger in the process. Those I've talked to have brought their own history to the city from all around and made it a better place to live. Atlantic City does not deserve the stereotype that is often associated with it. We at Stories of AC, and I'm sure all of you, know the importance of and the power in storytelling. We understand that sharing our stories and experiences can be used to build empathy and foster understanding. What I found interesting throughout this project is that many of the seniors, in all their humility, minimize their experiences, not realizing that they were an integral part of not just AC's history, but America's as well. And that goes to prove that many times we don't understand the weight of our experiences. At the end of one of our seniors' interviews, Mr. Ron Jordan to be exact, when asked what song would be on the soundtrack of his life, he responded, "May the work I've done speak for me." And I was truly inspirited. And after reflecting on his comment and further, and on all the stories we previously shared from the community members, I realized that Atlantic City is a city of doers. Lastly, I think the most astounding thing about this project is that we were able to get 11 seniors to communicate via new age technology. We had a few hiccups here and there, but overall, everything went pretty smoothly. For those who weren't already Zoom savvy, they were patient and willing to learn for the sake of this project. And that meant more to my team and I than they could ever know. And judging by the amount of our seniors that I see on this call, I think it's safe to say that they are Zoom experts now. So now I'd like to introduce to you our seniors, all the seniors that participated in this project. You can see they're popping up now. So from left to right, we have Mr. Michael Lovejoy Stafford, Mrs. Jane Gatton Rice, Miss Alma Walker, Mr. Clifford McMortar, Dr. Juanita High, Mr. Ralph Hunter, Miss Alfreda Mills, Mr. Ron Jordan and Mrs. Yvonne Jordan, Miss Yvonne Preston, and not pictured here, also Mr. Volia Hill. These are the elders of Atlantic City, and these are the lovely ladies and gentlemen who shared their stories with us, stories of educators, civil servants, military men, historians, community leaders, and more. The kindness and knowledge and wisdom shared by these elders were so profound, and I believe the same traits are held by many of AC's population. So we'll be hearing from some of these seniors shortly. But also before we move on, I'd like to shout out one of our lovely photographers, Nastasia Davis. I'm not sure if she's on the call. But I want to thank her for these striking portrait shots that she took of our seniors, and they really tell their own stories. All right. So earlier, Dr. Morris shared with us a few reflections from participating students. I'd like to share one more student reflection. The video clip that you're about to watch is from a Zoom meeting we had this past fall, or this past winter, excuse me, at the end of the semester. The seniors were invited to watch the students' class presentations. And before closing the session, this young man was the last to offer his thoughts. So we'll hear them now.
As you can see, that we were able to interview two elders that lived through very, very, very important times in the movement of equality as a whole. And I think that that plays a big part in really looking into their perspective on the future for us, you know, because they lived in a time where it was definitely way more, I could say, tension, you know, but now it's kind of a little different. But you could see through Mr. Jordan and Mrs. Jordan that they experienced things of racism that a lot of us can't really attest to right now. So for them to be able to say that they're optimistic and through prayer, they feel like things can change, and they feel optimistic because of people my age that are in their 20s, right, that are millennials, that when Mr. Jordan told us that he felt like he saw change in our future because people our age are able to come together better. And because we've been around people that are different colors than us and different ethnicities, and that plays a big part in definitely how we're going to go about changing things that are going to come about once, you know, we aren't able to look back on things, because in the moment you really don't see those things. And Mr. Jordan really put things in perspective for me, because for him to say that, I should be able to say the same thing. So I feel like that was a really big part of it. And he even brought up so many things that we went over in class. Like he brought up Stokely Carmichael. He brought up Dr. King, you know, all things in the 1964 convention. You know, we spoke about that in class. So it was kind of cool to see and have somebody tap into that memory and really tell us his experiences and things that he saw and things like that. So that was pretty big.
So as you can see, this project had a major impact on each participating party. What you didn't see at the end of this video was Dr. Morris thanking Tariq for sharing his thoughts and also explaining that that was the most she heard him talk all semester. So we all got a good chuckle out of that. But I think it really does testify to the fact that story sharing is powerful, and it really awakens and moves the soul. So now I'm going to stop share for a moment. Because now I'd like to introduce the seniors that we have on the call that'll be joining us for the conversation. So first we have Mr. Michael Stafford, affectionately known as Michael Lovejoy. He's lived in AC for 27 years by way of Mississippi and California. For the last 15 years, he's been working in security and truancy, a job he says he chose because he wanted to provide for his community. He currently works within the Atlantic City School District. So Mr. Stafford, if you can just wave so people know who you are. There we go, thank you. Next we have Miss Jane Gatson Rice, who is my aunt. She's lived in AC for most of her life after her parents migrated here from South Carolina for more job opportunities. She's a retired educator of 38 years, having taught elementary school in Pleasantville, New Jersey. I'm not sure if I see her, is she on here? If so, wait, oh, there you are. There we go. Next, we have Mr. Ralph Hunter, who moved to AC by way of Philadelphia when he was a teenager and never turned back. Many of you may recognize him. He is the founder and president of the African American Heritage Museum of Stockton, New Jersey. He collected 3,000 of the 12,000 objects in the museum himself. And I know he made it on because I saw his name in the waiting room. So if you could just wait, Mr. Hunter. And lastly, we have Ms. Alma Johnson, who is a lifelong AC resident and a true pillar of the community. She spends her time volunteering and sitting on many boards across the city, such as the AC Arts Commission. Although she was not one of the seniors interviewed, she played a major role in this project by helping me to mobilize elders from the Golden Circle, a club of which she is a member. We really could not have made it possible without her. And thank you, Ms. Alma, for joining us. So let's jump right into this conversation. This question is for the seniors. Thank you again for joining us and for participating in the project. So as we all know, 2020 proved to be an extraordinary year, to say the least. From the onset of a global pandemic to the social unrest and uprising sparked by police brutality against Black people in this country, to the hot political scene, our country and our community's resilience was really tested. So I'm going to offer this question to the seniors on the call. When we first invited you to participate in this project in September, how were you feeling and where were you mentally and emotionally? Why, in the midst of so much turmoil, were you amenable to being part of a project that obviously required a certain level of vulnerability? And I see Ms. Alma Johnson is unmuted, so I'm going to invite you to answer that first, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, hello, everyone. I like volunteering, number one. I retired at 77, so you know how much I like to work. I was a postmaster for 22 years in Elwood, New Jersey. I worked here in Atlantic City for 10 years. I started out as a 20-hour regular carrying mail. I think I've worked in every department here in Atlantic City in the post office that you could. Worked for the inspectors, etc. Was a supervisor before I became a postmaster there. And after that, I went to the Superior Court of New Jersey, and I had to take a civil service test, ladies and gentlemen, at 60 again. So I passed it. And I got to be a jury. At first I was a court representative, but then I turned out to be a jury aide, and I really enjoyed my 17 years there. And the only reason why I sort of retired was because I wanted young people to be able to, let's say, apply for the job I had. I had enough, and I also wanted a chance to work in the community. I'm also the secretary for the Venice Park Civic Association. I'm on the Diocesan Housing Corporation Board, and I'm very active in my church, which is at Holy Spirit. We call it the Parish of St. Monica now. And when they asked me, number one, I'm pretty upbeat, even with the pandemic. I like quiet because I grew up in a family of 9 children. So the pandemic doesn't bother me, being alone and just meditating. Plus, I'm very busy. I'm in the Golden Circle. I'm the chaplain, but I'm also involved in whatever they're doing. And I've just had so many good things in my life that I think that despite all that's going on in this world, I've adjusted to it. I take every day as it comes. I like for people to treat people the way they want to be treated, which I believe would be the solution for all kinds of racism and all the things that we encounter in our world. I think that I wrote some of this stuff down. And I've always wanted, and I'm going to make a good note of this, Black people to be known for their contributions, for just living, because, ever since our forefathers came here as slaves, we've encountered so much, even in this day. We're still encountering it. And people who are in Black Lives Matter, and I even joined it, I feel that everyone is sort of taking it in a different way. And we can't help if people protest and go break up things and loot and all of that. Most of those people weren't even part of the Black Lives Movement. But it's up to us to let people know. And I'm glad that I was able to help with this, because I see that the young people, like Ron Jordan and Yvonne said, are our key to the future. Because when I came up, you were sort of quiet, so you didn't speak out because, you know, you just didn't. I think you were even taught by your parents, and we didn't go a lot of places because we knew we wouldn't be welcome. And if you want to really get down to the gist of it, we had everything over on the north side that we needed. We didn't even have to go on the south side, as we called it. But I just feel that with all that's going on, I'm glad to contribute. And I think that the Black people that are coming up today, and I'm saying the word Black because I may be light skinned, but guess what? I'm Black. And so I'm happy and I'm glad to see the young people that are doing this. We did it several years ago. We gathered 100 seniors and they just told the stories of their lives in Atlantic City, and they were archived then by Stockton. And I just think Christina's dealing with the civil rights movement and et cetera, et cetera. I think it's wonderful. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. You hit so many great points, and you also gave us a few precursors for our event. We're going to be talking about the North Side at some point, so thank you for teeing us up in that way.
Oh, can I add this?
Sure.
Former Judge Nelson Johnson wrote the book. I had him here in my home. I introduced him to seniors, some who are not here, you know, they're deceased. And I also was his jury person and brought him on the bench many a time.
Wow.
And I'm still a friend of his. In fact, I know all the judges because eventually I had to put them on the bench, including Julio Mendez, who is the big shot down there.
Thank you for adding that. Such rich stories, as you can see already. We have some wonderful stories. I'd like to invite one of our other seniors, Mr. Stafford or Miss Gadsden Rice, if you'd like to jump in on that question. And I can remind you of that. Basically, how were you feeling around the time that we asked you to participate in this project? And why were you so amenable to participating, although it required some level of vulnerability?
Well, I was open because it was my daughter who approached me. My daughter is Malika, to join this intergenerational Zoom. And I thought it was an outright beautiful opportunity to give some information in reference to my personal story about racism in America, macrocosm America, microcosm Atlantic City. But I felt that at the time we were in the throes of a pandemic that caused us to shelter in place and began to deal with ourselves. Because my wife, my children were asking me, why am I doing all of these strange things? Because now I had no place to go because we were restricted on our movements. The only place you can go is get gas and go to the grocery store and maybe to BJ's or Walmart or Sam's. It's about the only places you can go, or to the grocery store. And I began to do some introspection, looking inside myself. And a lot of the things that had been locked up, pushed aside, not paid any attention to, I was able to start dealing with some of the things that I didn't have the time or the opportunity, because in this rat race, we have a tendency to kind of compartmentalize things and not deal with them and just put them away. And some of the creative things began to come out, like I have a character. I went to the Laney College in Oakland, California, and I came out of the theater, and I was dealing with revolutionary theater by the great Marvin X. Jackman in Oakland, California. And I had a character that I developed. His name is Richard Deek, D-E-E-K. And he's anti everything that you could ever think of. You know, he's on the extreme of everything. And I began to dabble in some of my music. I began to dabble in poetry. I began to read, and I began to study more while we were under lockdown. And this opportunity came to help give some insight into my experiences and experiences overall by us Black people, about the civil rights and about racism that I've experienced. Just 2 nights ago, we had a heated conversation, my daughters and my wife, in reference to some of the damage that has been perpetrated on myself because of white supremacy, damage perpetrated on them because of white supremacy, damage perpetrated on dark-skinned Black people because of white supremacy, and it got to be heated. But leading up to this point, in participating in the Zoom call and participating in the interview process, hopefully they'll be able to see that there is a way out from being damaged, overrun, oppressed, depressed, from dealing with those who pervert white supremacy. I felt it was an outstanding opportunity for them to get a chance to see from someone who is a participant in the game of white supremacy here in America, in Atlantic City. So I told it the way I did. I didn't want to be over dramatic. I didn't want to be overly political, but I want to be straight to the point, and I want to be clear that white supremacy is on its deathbed. And we're seeing, as a result of white supremacy on the deathbed, in need of a resuscitation, but there's no one to resuscitate it because it's dying a natural death. And the future of our young people is a great, great future. And all they have to do is side on the side of truth. Not what you think it is, but as the facts actually are. And it's called actual facts, as it really is. So I saw it as a great opportunity to interact with our young people and to give them some perspective and an idea of what it's like to be a victim of white supremacy.
Thank you so much for that. Wow. So many facts that you hit upon. Like you said, there's so many layers to systemic racism, and even within the Black community. So I can only imagine how heated that conversation was.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Your
And
family.
if you know Malika, it was heated.
Yes, and for those of you who don't know, Malika is part of the COM program, and she's also one of Stories of Race's interns. We love her. Of course, we love her dad now too. Thank you for that.
Yes,
I'd like to toss it to either Ms. Jane Gatson-Rice or Mr. Hunter if they'd like to answer. I'm looking for Ms. Gatson-Rice. Would you like to answer? Okay, you have to unmute yourself. There we go. All right.
First of all, my family came to Atlantic City when I was 1.5 years old. We came from South Carolina. Most of the extended family came north. However, one went south. When my niece, Christina, asked me about participating in this program, the reason, there were 2 reasons. One, I was returning a favor to her after she did an excellent program for me for my sorority. And then secondly, I felt that my experiences living in Atlantic City and the information I have about Atlantic City was probably information that a lot of people didn't have. And I wasn't really aware of all of it until a few years ago, after my husband, Archie Rice, passed and left all of this information his father had left to him about Atlantic City back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I had recently, I believe it was 2019, did a Black History program for my sorority, and we wanted to do something different. And I also had I'm from a large family also. There were 10 children, 10 of us. And a lot of them, I'm one of the oldest ones, and a lot of them were not aware of what Atlantic City was like back in the time when I was growing up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So when I began to tell them about a lot of the things that I encountered, they, was basically shocked. So from that perspective, I agreed to do this program. There are a lot of there's a lot of information that I contributed to Stockton about Atlantic City. I started with and this information, a lot of it was from the Black History program that I presented along with a soror of mine. Now it was unique in that she was one of the few people who had amassed a treasure trove of memorabilia about President Obama. She had probably one of the largest collections in the country. And in fact, she told me that he had asked her for some of the items from her to use, I guess, in his library. So I asked her to bring some of those things to that Black History program. And then I hit on another idea. She grew up in Florida. And of course, I grew up in Atlantic City. So I said, well, we got into a little discussion about what was it like, what was it like growing up in the South as opposed to growing up in the North? And she said, oh, it was much worse in terms of segregation and discrimination in the South. So I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm not sure about that. So that's how our presentation developed. I told the story of my growing up in the North, which was Atlantic City, and she told the story of her growing up in the South, which was Florida. And she started with her story first. And then when she concluded that, I started with mine. And I also had a lot of factual information, a lot of pictures. I even have here the book from Atlantic City, which my father-in-law left his son, Archie. And this is the book. It's called Professional and Business Directory. Now, this was published back in the 40s or the 30s. And this tells all of the businesses that were in Atlantic City. You see many of the pictures there of the people who had businesses in Atlantic City, and how prosperous it was on the north side. As Alma mentioned, the city was segregated, but we really didn't have to go on the south side for anything. There were so many things here on the north side that we were basically self-sufficient. Just to show you a couple of the pictures of And I believe some of these I gave to my niece to give to Stockton.
Yes, that's your presentation.
Yeah, you can even see some of the people, the older members of Atlantic City. Even some of the people in this photo, Dr. Doggett and I'm trying to remember, DeBaptist, Mr. DeBaptist, and some of those people who were instrumental in bringing uh, a lot of the businesses here. And my family, Archie's family, were first in a lot of things that happened in Atlantic City. This is a picture of Archie's mother. And she was the first Black nurse at Atlantic Care. Archie's father had quite a number of businesses. Some of you may know this and some may not. He owned well, first of all, he was the first Black person to sell cars in Atlantic City. And how that was done, I don't want to go through all of this, but how that was done was that dealerships would give him cars to drive, and he would drive around the city and take orders for cars, and then take the people back to the showroom, and they would buy cars that way. Archie also went into business as a automobile salesman, and in fact worked with Ron Jordan, as Ron Jordan knows. So anyway, getting back to the program that we presented it at one of the senior citizens buildings, and after at the end of the program, it was concluded that it wasn't much difference growing up in the North as it was growing up in the South. We had my soror, and I had some of the exact same experiences. One of the ones that stands out to me is the one where they had to walk to school, and when they were walking to school in Florida, I'm trying to remember the city she lived in, they would have to go through white neighborhoods. And she specifically mentioned how this white man would set his dogs out on them as they came through that area in front of his house. And they were bitten and chased and everything by these dogs. And I related a lot of incidents where I went to New Jersey Avenue School, and the school was segregated, but there was another elementary school about not even a block away, Massachusetts Avenue, and that was all white. My school was all Black. And even in second grade, it was evident to me that there was a difference in the way that we were treated. And we were cautioned, and as I was saying, I don't know if it was somehow mandated or not, but I lived on, at that time, Delaware Avenue. We were not supposed to go past Connecticut Avenue, going up to the inlet after dark, or go past Atlantic Avenue after dark, or we were kept in a certain area. And it wasn't until much later, and I believe that was after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that things began to open up. And even when I went away to college, I was in the top percent of my classmates at Atlantic City High School, but I could never get a job, and I needed to work to buy my school clothes because it was such a large family, and I wanted to help. But I would go every summer on Atlantic Avenue and put in on the boardwalk and put in applications for a job. I could never get a job. Even though I saw some of my fellow students who were white in these same establishments that I put in an application at and never was called back. It wasn't until I went away to college that I saw an application for a job application for a job on the boardwalk. I filled it in, sent it back, and at that time, there was approximately only 40 students at the college I was attending. That college at the time was Glassboro, 40 Black students, I should say. So I don't know if the man thought that there were no Blacks there or not, the owner of the business, but he told me to come in when I came home on a break. And I had such a long resume from working at menial jobs. The only thing I could get was the job of a chambermaid or some type of cleaning and so forth. But I did the best I could at every job I worked at. And therefore, I started working at 12 years old. So I had such a resume of jobs when I went to college that I guess that spoke well for me, and I was hired on the boardwalk in, I believe it was 1964. And it was really kind of like a first because I saw very few, if any, other Black people that were visible right on the boardwalk.
Right. I'd like to jump in here, Angelique. I know you've given us so much information. I mean, I know you're hitting a lot of points that's in your specific content that we've created for you, which we're going to offer at the end. But yes, just so much. And, you touched on a lot of the things that we're going to touch on today. So I want to cut you off for now, just because I'm going to jump forward. But I do want to give Mr. Ralph Hunter an opportunity to answer the question if he'd like to. And I see his name. I'm not sure if he's at the screen. But
yes, I'm at the screen.
Oh, okay, great.
Hi there. I want to commend Stockton University and its faculty and students for putting together this program. I think it's a great, wonderful opportunity for the students to have an appreciation of what took place in the past.
I believe we lost sound, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Hunter?
Time, and I hope to be able.
Sorry, your sound went out. We can hear you now.
I hope to be able to put that together. So my story about Atlantic City. I was a young man, I guess about 16 and a half, 17 years old. And I came to Atlantic City on a bus on the Memorial Day weekend. And I got off the bus and saw a metropolis of people who look like me. Now, I came out of Philadelphia. I'm a PK kid, which means that my dad was a preacher in Philadelphia. And I'm born and bred in West Philly. So after arriving here, getting off that bus, seeing all of these people who look so very much like me, they were policemen, they were firemen, they owned stores, they owned restaurants, they owned hotels, they owned their own cabs, their own jitneys. The churches were very, very powerful institutions, and there still are thriving quite well all around our country. But seeing what was taking place here in Atlantic City as a young 17-year-old kid just fascinated me. And I said to myself, this is a place for me. I've got to get out of Philadelphia and come to Atlantic City. So fell in love, get married, beautiful lady here in Atlantic City, and have wonderful family. I'm one of 10 children myself from Philadelphia. So understanding what was going on in Philly and comparing that to Atlantic City was like night and day. Seeing the opportunity of people to walk around the streets, to dress, to go in and out of the nightclubs, in and out of the restaurants, the hotels, was so fantastic for me. I started storing these things in my brain. And I said, one day I'd like to do a museum about the history of Atlantic City. So I had met a man by the name of Sid Trusty, who was my mentor, who taught me so much about the history of Atlantic City because he was born and raised here, and he was an entertainer right here in Atlantic City. Understanding the importance of history is one of the most important things that a person can really gather and grasp in one's hand and be able to store it away in such a way that people in the future will have an opportunity to come back and take a peek at it. So what then happened was I got a job, and I got a job working at a place called Garbage Mills. It was called Garwood Mills, but it was a very important department store. It was the second discount department store in New Jersey. It's kind of like what Walmart is today, or like what the big stores are today. We did it in a smaller way in Atlantic City. It was up at the inlet. It was up on Main and Caspian Avenue. It was a big trolley barn that they converted into a department store. And a lot of people around Atlantic City would remember that. So understanding the importance of being part of a company and becoming manager of a property such as that was really a great inspiration to me. So I had to get a place to live. So I applied for an apartment at Stanley Home Village. And I was granted an apartment on New York Avenue. And I'll remember like it was yesterday, my rent was $35 a month for the apartment. And it was fantastic. But back then, Mr. Leggett, who ran the Stanley Home Village, kind of had an unwritten law. And what he wanted the families to do who lived in the village, it was the old village or the new village, is to be there and to be their starter house and to start saving your money and go out and buy your own house. And that's exactly what we were able to do, my wife and I. We bought our own house over in Monroe Park. I guess I was 19 years old when I purchased my first property in Atlantic City. And always had a wonderful love for the city, its people, its understanding of its great education system, its wonderful sports that they had here in Atlantic City. So after gathering all this information, Atlantic City was at its peak in the 60s and the 70s, and it started to change a little bit. The Democratic Convention came here in 1964, and the people who came to the convention, a lot of the news media gave Atlantic City a bum rap because its hotels weren't up to quality or up to standards like the hotels in New York or in Miami were. And Atlantic City started to go down a tad, and it went down a tad further. And eventually what happened, it got down to a point where we had to get to a point of no return. And at that point in time, there was a guy by the name of, with quite a few people who got together on the north side and worked to try to organize bringing gambling into Atlantic City. Pierre Hollingsworth, so some of the great leaders in the north side of Atlantic City were all proponents of having gambling come into Atlantic City. And eventually it was able to get put on the ballot. And the second time around, it passed. And gambling came to Atlantic City and kind of changed the format, how the city was put together. So in doing that, what happened, all the casinos started coming into Atlantic City. Well, the first one was Resorts International, of which that opened in 1978, and other casinos came after that. Well, what happened to the Black community? The Black community at that point in time was from Connecticut Avenue, as one of the ladies said, up to Arkansas, from Atlantic Avenue up to Venice Park, not including Venice Park. That was the area where some 30,000 people of color lived and worked and owned and operated their own businesses. It was really, really a tremendous metropolis for people to come from all over the United States. They come to Atlantic City to see our great entertainers who came to our Club Harlems and our wonderful night spots we had in Atlantic City. At the point in time, we had some 13 doctors that were of African American. We had a millionaire in Atlantic City. Her name was Miss, oh Lord, I'm losing my foot.
Sarah Spencer, Washington.
Yeah.
Yes.
Madam Sarah Spencer, Washington.
Yes. Actually, I want to interject here. I know we have some common themes happening with the North Side. So much rich information to share. You know, we're probably going to need to have a part two because there's just so many things we can touch upon. But I do want to give our students an opportunity to share because clearly they were also receiving such great information from you all during this time and during your interviews. So I want to make sure that we hear from them too and
Absolutely.
the impact that this project had on them. So I do want to talk to the students and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. You can tell us what your major is at Stockton and why you decided to take this class. And also talk to us about the impact that this project had on you. So since I see Tina Byrne on my screen right now, I'm going to offer her or invite her to go ahead and chime in first.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tina Byrne. I just recently graduated from Stockton in December, but I was a comm major with a concentration in PR and a minor in business. You know, I honestly took this course because of, well, partly because of Dr. Morus. I love Dr. Morus. And also just because I thought that the class was so timely and definitely could offer me a lot of like unique perspectives. And when I first heard about the project that we'd be doing, I was obviously really excited, but it really did, like, you know, all the quotes that were on the screen before, it really did have a profound impact on all of us, especially like my group. We interviewed Miss Jane Gadsden-Rice, Mr. Ralph Hunter, and Mr. Michael Lovejoy Stafford. So yeah, I'm just really happy to be here and also really excited to hear from everyone.
Right. I also like to ask you, of course, you know, one of our main goals at Stories of AC is to help to shift the narrative of what's often portrayed of Atlantic City. Are you originally from Atlantic City? And if not, after doing this project, did your perception of the city change?
So I'm from North Jersey. I'm from Cliffside Park, New Jersey, about 10 minutes away from the George Washington Bridge. So I would say like I'm more of a unique case because I'm one of the few people here that's not from like Central or, you know, South Jersey. But I didn't really have a real connection to Atlantic City. And I would say just like this project really made me think of Atlantic City as not just Stockton's second campus or, you know, like all the gentrification. It's really like a city, it's a close-knit community. And I really got that, especially from Miss Jane Gadsden-Rice, like all the pictures that she was showing us during our interview of her, you know, mother-in-law and her father-in-law. So yeah, that's what I think of Atlantic City now, but I would say I was a clean slate and now I just think of it as like a very historically rich community.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to toss it to Paul. And once again, you could just state your name, what your major is, and why you took the class, and then also your reflections about the project.
Great. Okay. So my name is Paul Kaiser. Last semester was actually my last semester, so I just graduated. I took the class as a comm major, but I definitely took it because I wanted to learn about different perspectives on things. And this topic is something that we don't really usually focus on. And I really thought that, you know, learning about this experience is something that we usually don't hear these voices because we always say, you know, why are we worrying about that when we should worry about this instead? And I think that amplifying these voices with a project like this is definitely something that needs to be done. And it could help us move forward, not just as communities and Atlantic City, but as a country and even as a world.
Thank you so much, Paul. Sam Apple, you can jump in right here. Sam Apple is also one of our, she's currently one of our interns at Stories of AC, but she was a student in Dr. Morris's class during the time we did the project.
Yes, hi, I'm Sam. I'm a junior comm major. As you said, I'm an intern with Stories of AC. I took this class last semester, pretty much just to like fill a requirement, but it ended up turning out to be like my favorite class I've ever taken here. My connection with AC before like the class was just kind of like a place I would go to kind of just vacation, like go to the beach or visit the Stockton campus. And now I've realized that it's a city full of history and full of like amazing people. I got to interview Miss Hill and Dr. High, and it was such a great experience, and I would love to do it again if I could.
Thank you. And lastly, we have Emily.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Montgomery. I am currently a senior at Stockton. I am also a communications major. This, I would definitely say, is the most interesting and unique project that I've ever done throughout any of my classes. I think as far as AC goes, I've never really had any positive or negative opinions of AC. I think especially now that I'm a Stockton student, I'm definitely closer to AC. But I think in the interest of the civil rights movement, it's definitely easy for a lot of people to immediately think of the South and kind of like put it in that bubble that it only really affected people in the South. But I think, you know, speaking with our elders last semester, Paul, Tina, and I were actually all in a group, so we interviewed the same 3 elders. But speaking with them really like opened my eyes. I especially Miss Gatson Rice, she showed us a map of the city and where, you know, white people lived and where Black people weren't and were allowed to go. It really like kind of puts it into perspective for you that these things, you know, happened everywhere, not just what, you know, the history textbooks tell you or what you learn in high school or whatever. I definitely think after this project, I have a greater sense of community feeling for AC. Especially, you know, we connected with the elders and the elders connected with us, which I think is really impactful. I also really appreciated that almost every single one of the elders that participated expressed their appreciation for young people, and they have very high hopes for the future, which is very refreshing, being someone who definitely is going to play a big part in that in the future. So overall, amazing project. And just like Sam said, I would do it all over again if I could.
Thank you so much, Emily. You actually hit on a point I wanted to talk about. I had some more things to share, but we just had so much information here. We ran out of time, but I do want to talk to the fact that you said that this, the seniors really had high hopes and a lot of faith in today's generation. And it made me think of a specific moment during one of the interviews. It was Mr. Stafford's actually. And he talked about a radio station show he was listening to at some point, and I know the students are probably familiar with what I'm going to say. He called in to this radio station which was hosted by a white woman. And basically she was talking about the Black Lives Matter protests, and she was saying that she didn't really understand why she saw so many young white people out protesting, because they don't really have a comprehensive understanding of what's going on, because they weren't around for the civil rights movement and so on and so forth. And I feel as though sometimes that is a common misconception, that the young generation doesn't really fully understand what's happening. But oddly enough, our seniors thought completely different. I had a clip to show, I'm not going to show for time's sake, but basically all of the seniors that joined us had the same, the same beliefs and thoughts when it came to today's youth. And they all agreed that they are really proud of them, and they really had a lot of faith in them, because they are the ones that are going to make the change. They're not standing for it anymore. And they're just very forward thinking. And I know Mr. Stafford once again mentioned something about the youth of today being hip hopped. They're now part of the hip hop culture. So that helps them, their understanding of what's going on and what's relevant in the world around them. They've seen the senseless killings of police brutality. So they really do understand, and they know what's going on. And once again, they're not standing for it. So it was just really wonderful to see that the elders felt that way about the youth. It was just really encouraging. So now I just want to take you to the actual launch of our project on our website. So I'm going to screen share where you can find this information on our website. So as you can see, this is our website. We have our Intergenerational project tab at the top, so it's easy to find. And once you get to the page, you will see pictures of all of our participating seniors. And all you have to do is click on a name, and it'll take you to an individual page for that senior. And it goes over their interview, gives you some other content, some graphic content. Some have sound bites, some have video clips from the interviews. And yes, they each have their own page that features them. So when you get a chance, please go out and check them out. They have such great information. We have Mr. Stafford with Mr. Hunter in this picture, both of whom we interviewed. When you get a chance, like I said, check it out. They had some wonderful, wonderful information to share. I'll make sure I'll drop the link to that portion of our website before we leave today. And I really just wanted to leave the last 2 minutes. I know I said we were going to save some time for questions and answers and commentary. And I want people to really join the conversation and add in where needed. So to add some order to it, if you'd like to ask a question to any of our our participants, you can put a thumbs up or you can write in the chat. I know Toby's been manning the chat. Toby, do we have any questions as of yet?
Yeah, we do have a couple of questions actually.
Oh, great, Erin. Yeah.
Yeah, so from 3 different folks. So Turia Abdul Rahim, who is an historian and educator here in Atlantic City, she wanted to know if Stockton still has her book available for access for the students. Growing up in the other Atlantic City, Washes in the North Side. And for folks who don't know, that also became a play that was staged at Stockton at Dante Hall and has been revised at times as well. So that's one question, which I don't actually know the answer to, but my sense is in our library, we probably do have access to that. And then Karen Rusnick asked, how many Black-owned businesses are present in Atlantic City? And is that, something we've considered? And I know that is definitely let the elders speak to that as well. But I know that, part of what we're charged with doing with Stories of AC is really focusing on Black-owned enterprise and how can we build that up. And we work really hard to try to utilize local artists from Atlantic City as well, and those beautiful portraits. And then Vicki Levy asked, anybody know or have been to the Walt's Dream Arena? It was on Arctic in Ohio from the 20s to the 40s. She's doing some research. It was a boxing arena. So if anybody has any information on that as well. And then of course we can also open it up to the larger group.
Okay, in reference to the Wall Stream.
Wall Stream, oh.
Yeah, the Wall Stream was indeed there, and it was a big boxing arena. It was really dancing hall. It was quite a few places. It is now the Walk.
No. Now the Wall Stream was in the middle of the block on Ohio Avenue between Arctic and Baltic. It's now houses. They just tore it down.
On Ohio Avenue.
Between Arctic and Baltic on the north side on the east side of the town, on the uptown side. It was a big box there.
Okay, I guess we're looking at 2 different locations.
Yeah.
Where I'm seeing the Wall Stream, it was right there, Distant Avenue, between Distant and Baltic Avenue, back to Baltic Avenue.
Distant could have run that far then, I'm not certain.
Yeah, I have some photographs.
It could be in the same block as where Distant is, yes, but it was down far.
Would you ask someone to get in touch with me? I do have some photographs of the old Wall Street.
Yeah, that's some things there.
Yeah, that's so interesting because we don't know the legacy of sports in Atlantic City is a whole nother aspect as well about how about Black-owned businesses now? Anybody have a sense about where we are? And I don't know that there's a Chamber of Commerce specifically. Is there, Mr. Hunter? I mean, there's an Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce, but not necessarily a.
Well, there's a African American Chamber of Commerce.
African American,
takes care of all of southern New Jersey. As far as businesses are concerned, at one time we had 32 Black-owned liquor licenses on the north side. We had some 43 hotels and cottage houses. We had cab companies. But as it stands today, with the advent of redlining has changed America completely, because once the casinos open in Atlantic City, all of the bars and restaurants no longer cease to exist. Where we had all those liquor licenses, they don't exist anymore. Right now, there's only one Black liquor license on the north side of Atlantic City.
Really?
There's not one African American owned restaurant on the north side. When I say the north side, Kim and Kelsey's, of course, is on the south side of town, on the north side of town. So at one point in time, we had all these different businesses that were available to the community that don't exist anymore. But that's part of a book that I'm writing about what happened to the Black-owned businesses on the north side, and not only the north side, in cities all over the country. There are only 4 basic businesses that survive in traditional African American communities where African Americans supported back in the 20s and 30s. And there's 4 basic businesses that survive today. are the beauty parlors, the barbershops, the black church, and the morticians.
Yes.
That are still surviving and doing exceedingly well today.
Yes, but even with the beauty shops, we have so few now compared to what we had. When we had the north side had the board of trade instead of the plumbers. Hi. So Ralph, why don't you talk about the board of trade that we had back here, where all the business people
The
belong.
board,
Go ahead.
We seem to have some
Froze,
technical
it
difficulties. Probably
Yeah,
have.
it looks like you might have froze
Yeah,
there
well,
for a
while
minute.
he is, I can jump in here. I was actually going to talk about redlining in my presentation. So for those of you who don't know what redlining is, I just wanted to offer a point of reference. So redlining refers to a discriminatory, pattern of disinvestment and obstructive lending practices that act as an impediment to home ownership among African Americans and other people of color. So basically, it was the way that the U.S. government continues segregation in America after, civil rights and all of that happened. So just wanted to put that out there for those who weren't aware of what redlining is.
And I can speak to that because when I went to buy my first home, my husband and I, we had our money in what was then called Boardwalk National Bank. And between him and me, we had a nice sum for people at that, time. When I went there with him, they told us that we weren't the cream of the crop. They came out and said that. So I went to Cape Bank that had at that time was on New York Avenue, and I applied for a loan, my husband and I, to buy our home. And we told them, we had been turned down at Boardwalk National Bank. When they saw how much money we had in our account, they said, take your money out of that bank, bring it here, and we'll give you the loan. And to me, that was it was discrimination. And even when I saw, I can't talk about my first home, but my second home, but I know that when I went to sell that, at that time too, they had Black people who would come to try to buy places from you because they worked for white people. And they thought maybe just because you knew them, you would let them buy your place. And I got an offer from so-called, person, and I ended up selling my second home when they put the tunnel there because my house was sitting where the tunnel is. So, and the only reason I knew at that time, after the person had offered my husband and I this paltry amount of money for our home, only way I knew that they were even looking at my home was because when I went to a meeting at the city hall, they had a, what do they call it? The artist view of what they were going to do. And in one picture, my house was in it. And in the second picture where the tunnel was, they had taken my house, out of it. So after that, I made my deal with, better than that,
Thank you so much. I just want to thank everyone so much for sharing. I know we're a little bit over our time and I want to be cognizant of that. So much information was shared. We value all of this information. And like I said, we may have to have a part 2 because just listening to some of these stories, I can really sit here all day and listen to this great history. So thank you so much. I do just want to add one final plug before we leave. We have an event coming up this Thursday, the 18th at 7:00 p.m. and it's called the Resistance Roundtable. So I just wanted to share a little teaser. If you have not already, please go and register for the event. And here's what you can look forward to.
We can't solve all the problems of the world, but we can talk and dialogue, and we have to get an understanding of how we move forward in a realistic, rational way. We need everyone to participate and contribute to the success of the United States.
Stockton. What's the name of the program?
So yes, please, if you have not registered, it's going to be a great event. Make sure you do so. And once again, it's called the Resistance Roundtable. And basically, we're going to have a virtual roundtable where we'll invite some of our community leaders and activists and entrepreneurs and things of that sort to come and talk about what resistance looks like to them and what they're doing in the community to make a change. So I just wanted to plug that in there. Once again, please, you can go to our website as well as our social media and find the link to register for that event. Thank you once again, Stories of AC team. Am I missing anything, Dr. Morris? I think we're
Yes,
good.
thank you. This was so super. I hope you'll all check out the link to the Intergenerational Multimedia Project. And yeah, and I guess we're gonna have to do a part 2 because there were so many stories to share. To the elders and the students who joined us today, thank you so very much for participating. And that's all I have for you guys. Just lots and lots of thanks. And I hope you guys will check out the link for the Intergenerational Project.
Wonderful. Once again, thank you to everyone that participated in the project and who participated in today's events. We really do appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Thank you again, seniors, and thank you again, students. And we'll talk to you all soon.